Good morning and welcome to the Singapore Fintech Festival. I'm René Michau, and this morning I'll be hosting an Ask Me Anything session with Bridie Ohlsson, and we'll get to our guest in just a moment. But first of all, I'd like to say we're sitting here in the Rapyd office in Singapore. It's at Boat Quay, if you're hanging out on the virtual map, located in the networking zone. The format of these sessions is relaxed. The idea is to have a bit of fun, ask anything you want of our guests, and the more questions you as an audience can pose, the more interactive we can be. You're welcome to ask anything that's slightly amusing. We'll try and make the session lighthearted. And yeah, looking forward to seeing all of that. I'll be checking my phone periodically, not for any sporting scores, but just to see those comments. And let's get stuck into it. First of all, let me introduce our speaker. Our guest today is Bridie Ohlsson. She is the CEO of Geora, which is an ag tech firm focused on getting much needed capital to primary producers who are disadvantaged in today's ecosystem. So Bridie, welcome.
Thanks, René, and thanks, Rapyd. It's really cool to be in an in-person event.
Isn't it? It's nice to kind of sit and relax in an actual space.
Exactly. I mean, I know that we're speaking to a virtual audience, but one is better than none these days.
Exactly. So to get us started, why don't you tell us a bit about Geora and what you've been up to, and how did you end up doing this for a living?
How did I end up running an ag tech fintech business?
Yeah.
It was a natural pathway out of law school.
Well trodden.
Yeah, law and politics into ag tech. But no, I 5 years ago now graduated law school, did that for a bit. Didn't want to stick to the legal pathway, and so started exploring the other side of what I studied, which was supply chains and the economics around how supply chains work and don't work.
Yep.
And that led me really quickly in 2016 to the world of blockchain,
yes.
Which was obviously very different pre-ICO, pre-ICO world, and pre where we are now with kind of commercial stuff. But landed me in front of a woman, Emma Weston, who was starting a business called AgriDigital. It wasn't even called AgriDigital at the time. And that was, ended up being one of the first companies playing in the agricultural space using blockchain technology. We did all the headline pilot stuff throughout 2017, 2018. But we were always really focused on what was the value for farmers, because AgriDigital was founded by a group of farmers. And they saw some really big problems in their businesses. They'd had experience where they were trying to access capital or export into a market where they knew they could get 10 times the price. But none of those options were available to them at the time because of how fragmented data is in ag. So what we were really focusing in on was how could we get better data capture happening, and then how we could use that information to transform the way that we trade and finance in agri supply chains. And so, long story short, I'm telling the long story actually. So AgriDigital ended up running one of the world-leading grain platforms, which is helping digitize the grain supply chain. And the blockchain workstream, which I was running, took on a bit of a life of its own. And as we know, the blockchain part is often behind the scenes, under the hood data stuff. And so we ended up spinning that out, putting it in Geora, and in end of 2018, I think 2 years ago, almost exactly, Geora was born.
Awesome.
So yeah.
And so tell me about the problems that you're solving, because I think that's pretty interesting. So, if we look at what's been discussed in the conference over the last few days, we've covered issues around data, we've covered issues around access for in terms of financial inclusion. We've covered a few discussions on blockchain and what that might mean. From your perspective, let's dive right into the actual core problem that you're solving and potentially some of the statistics around that. I think it's if you look at the retail price of a primary product, or what's ultimately manufactured out of that versus what the primary producer gets, there's quite a big disparity there, isn't there? Yeah,
enormous. Some of those numbers are pretty horrifying when you look at what a farmer's actually paid for something that you buy on the shelf. But I think that the real challenge I see is that despite the way our current supply chains aren't really working for farmers, we're still putting the pressure on solving for the biggest sustainability challenges that we currently have onto the farmer. So we want them to be more sustainable, we want them to be more efficient, we want them to be more secure, and at the same time, they are one of the least empowered along our supply chain. to actually make any of those changes because access to capital is so challenging.
Yep.
So what we're trying to do, and the number that I dream about, if we want to get to the stats, they get a bit staggering, but it's $2.1 trillion annually, in addition to current finance, that the UN says needs to be injected into our supply chains to meet sustainable development goals. So $2.1 trillion. And at the moment, I don't think that any of the digital systems are in place to deliver that finance.
Yep.
And the way that finance is delivered at the moment is in ways that doesn't quite work for the farmer. So it's not seasonal, it's not asset-backed, it's not like just in time. You know, we've talked about this before, but even like reconciling end of day, end of week, end of 2 weeks, it doesn't get the finance cheap enough to the farmer who needs it. So, you know, we've done work with farmers in Papua New Guinea, with the United Nations Food and Ag Organisation, and we're looking at ways that they can create a really simple digital record of pigs so they can then use that to access finance.
Pigs on chain.
Pigs on chain for 2020. Oh, it was actually 2019, Year of the Pig.
Yeah,
so it was well timed.
I like it.
But yeah, we do the same thing with Australian farmers. You know, say you're a cotton farmer, and at the moment you can't really make much of a timing decision around when you sell your asset. You're forced to sell before you go into warehousing and ginning, so you don't even really know the quality of your cotton. Even though you might have been consistently producing premium cotton for 4 generations, you don't have that access to capital to actually hold on to your asset a little longer, make a better marketing decision. So we've been running products with AgriDigital on the Geora platform, helping those farmers hold on to their asset a little longer, make a better marketing decision, and the way they do that is using that asset record to access finance.
So let's unpack that a little bit, and I think just for, particularly for the audience, there's quite a lot
Sorry,
in that.
yes.
No. Like you explained it beautifully, but when we get into that, so we talked about the asymmetry between the way finance is provided over the life cycle of an asset, which kind of has a level of uncertainty built into it, right? So when you put seeds in the ground, or when you recycle a crop, or whatever you're doing to turn around in your seasons as a farmer, there's a level of uncertainty until the yield is actually produced. Now, I think there's probably 3 things worth talking about. One is technology is changing to help with the quality and productivity around that.
Yeah.
And then the second piece is there is information asymmetry in that. And then the third thing, which is what you're talking about in particular, is how do we get the capital into that ecosystem? So, sorry, I know that's like 3 things to talk about. No, that's good.
But so I think if we go back to the first piece, it's actually like data quality on farm, right?
Yep.
And I think there's 2 things there. The first is ag is the least digitised industry.
Yep.
So we know that we're dealing with a pretty low digital base here.
Yes.
At the same time, there is an enormous investment in ag tech at the moment.
Yep.
So I split my time evenly between my 2 loves, fintech and ag tech. But in the ag tech space, like there's so much happening in terms of improving the quality of data capture on farm.
Yep.
And there's amazing stuff that we can do in terms of predicting yields off the back of a really early crop.
Yep.
So there's ways that we can actually get pretty good reads on the value of an asset as it's being produced.
Yes.
So I guess that's the first thing, is that there's tech emerging on farm that's making this a little easier.
Yep.
But the next thing is actually providing that to a financier or to a supply chain body participant. Don't want to kind of stick to traditional financiers, because I think that's a broader pool of people financing this space, governments, NGOs.
Yep.
And if we think about what they need is verifiable value connected to that asset.
Absolutely.
So not only do they need to identify the asset, they need to then authenticate it. So the identity part is pretty binary. So we're looking at, is this in fact grain in Wagga?
Yep.
Yes, it is. Okay. How do we go about authenticating the value of that? And that's one of the things that's a little bit harder. And this is where we get a whole lot of companies using blockchain technology as a piece in trying to build digital trust into these asset records, so that we can start to say, okay, with a little bit more certainty, this is the value of this asset, and the financier can rely on that data.
Yep.
No, I'm stuck in the value of an asset.
But actually that leads us perfectly onto, so you've got better information around what the likely quality of the end product's going to be. You've got that information being given to the financier to allow for better decision making around the value of the asset. So the next question is, well then how does liquidity get into that, right? Because that's really, how do we bring capital in on the basis of that construct?
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we've found is that there's not a lack of capital wanting to be invested in this space. Even if you look at big ag businesses who are investing already and trying to authenticate and verify their supply chain, they have a mandate to improve the lives of their farmers as well. And this is one of the ways that they can really easily do that. There's an enormous amount of investment going into improving the livelihoods of farmers, improving the way that we're recording sustainability sustainability achievements and outcomes. Big companies who have a social license issue and they need to prove their carbon footprint. So these kind of challenges we're already investing in, and there is a better way we can invest in that if we invest in our farmers and we invest in our data. So I think that it's about creating, as you say, like the infrastructure then. Okay, so say there's a desire to invest, and then we can get the data coming through in a better way so that they can verify it. What's that plumbing that makes this investment work? And that's what we're building at Geora. So that's what we're trying to plug the gap in. And that looks like a system for certifying products using third parties, using smart contracts structured as certificates for industry bodies, and then it looks like better ways to facilitate finance. And we haven't solved all of the components here. I think that's like a really clear, a clear point to make. But we're getting closer, and by creating systems that bring together like the best of different technologies, or not even the best in some case, but technologies that work. I think that's we're slowly getting there. At the moment, for our customers, there is not a desire to receive any sort of financing crypto, and we don't have currencies that work within our systems with the level of, perceived risk or risk mitigation in order for farmers to feel comfortable receiving them for finance and payments.
Awesome.
So we move off chain for some stuff, and we work on chain for other things.
It's such a big problem, isn't it? For those of you who've just joined the session and are a little bit surprised about hearing us talk about farmers at a Fintech conference, we're here with Bridie Ohlsson from Geora, and we're diving into how we're leveraging Fintech to create better lives for farmers as primary producers, and it links back to our sustainability goals. Trying to ensure that we have sustainable primary production practices and getting capital through to that environment to be able to make that work. So Bridie, following on from that, one of the things that we've talked about once or twice is, when we look at supply chains and we look at blockchain, everyone goes, woo, provenance, right? And we talk about the provenance of whatever it is, whether it's tea or whether it's, what ingredients are in the thing at the supermarket shelf. I remember there was a meme during 2019 of people, taking QR code snaps of their products in the grocery and being able to see the whole supply chain and all that sort of stuff. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I would say, at risk of offending my own project and all of my colleagues, that my view on this is that blockchains really failed to deliver for ag supply chains. I think we've done two things, or two things have happened that mean that we've failed. It's been too expensive and too technical for the people who are actually going to benefit from it. And so the world of blockchain...
That sounds like finance.
Yeah, I know the banking world, that must feel quite familiar. But I think that a lot of us are seeing that we can do this differently now. And I think what we need to do is open up what's been like, the world of already vertically integrated supply chain participants to a world where we're rolling out to people who are really going to benefit from democratise access to data, which means that they can participate in digital economies for the first time. And rolling out capital, not just to big supply chain companies in new ways, but to people who've never received capital before. Or this kind of capital before. And I think that we're seeing a shift because we have a maturing of the technology. And it's not to say we've solved everything, but we're at a point, I think, where we can say, okay, there are certain people focusing on improving the base protocol pieces, and there are certain people looking at applying that to use cases. And that's where we sit. So we're not building a new protocol. We leverage existing technologies to build the Geora platform. And then we're, I guess, filling that gap between base protocol technologies and then the user, who's an ag supply chain participant. And I think there are more people playing in that space, and I think by drawing our bounds a little smaller and working with each other, we're actually able to achieve more.
And is that, I guess that's because you're much more focused on a very specific problem and leveraging others who are focused on the adjacent problems.
Yeah, and I have to say it was super exciting to be at like Consensus in New York and on the, the front session on the main stage, someone saying the best use case for this is agriculture.
Yeah, exactly.
When does that happen? So I think we were all really excited by that, and it was it is really promising, and the value that we can get in like the finance, in the trade security, and in traceability still is still it's enormous, but what we've realised is it's part of a much bigger system of building digital trust.
Yep.
And we need to focus on that. So we work with customers of Geora who were previously building their own blockchain and now have like awesome secure like QR replacements.
Yep.
So I think drawing those bounds has been a helpful exercise for us.
That's awesome. So I guess I would want to dive in next. So how's the industry responding? So in terms of, let's take Australia, for example. I know that we've had, a number of industry awards events recently. How did that go for you guys?
Just a little plug there
slightly
for me.
subtle plug.
Yes, we're part of both the Blockchain Australia and Fintech Australia communities.
Yep.
We just won a Finnies Award for the excellence in blockchain in Australia this year. For some work that we've done with the Australian tea tree industry, which is, I won't get sidetracked talking about our customers because I can all day.
Yep. We're going to meet your customers in a minute.
Yeah, awesome. But in terms of looking at how the industry is maturing, in Australia we saw the launch of the National Blockchain Roadmap, and then the establishment of working groups to address like the industry-specific challenges. The supply chain one was one of the first ones that was established, and I sit on that working group. I know that I've picked your brain about it previously, but what we're trying to do is really get into where is the industry value and make recommendations back to the government on where we should be focusing. And it's really, I think, Chloe White and the team have done an awesome job in prioritising this from an Australian government perspective. And I'm looking forward to seeing some really strong claims come out of that. And I think that we'll see, the value and the use cases that Australia can focus on emerge in much the same way like Singapore and China have identified specific use cases and areas where they see, there's a solution technically to some of their national challenges. So I think it's exciting what's happening in Australia this year. It's nice to have something exciting happening in 2020. And the ecosystem's definitely maturing. We've escaped lots of the ICO stuff.
Yep.
What does your t-shirt say today? No, this was a Zoom one, but obviously DeFi and things are still pretty hyped at the moment. But I think that there's also this like parallel focus on maybe the less exciting stuff, but getting it in practice. Yeah.
Okay. No, that's awesome. And so what I want to do is then take that. I think that's a really good example of where government engagement, technical solutions, and industry are all working together to come out with that. And we've actually, throughout the conference so far, we've been hearing a lot about the importance of that alignment between state organisations, commercial organisations, with a focus on sustainable development and inclusion. So where I want to take us from there is, let's meet like some of these farmers. Like, when we're talking about, everyone's got a slightly different perception of a farmer, right? Like if you go to the US, a farmer means something very different to if you go to Kenya, or if you go to Australia, or if you go to Indonesia. Or China. Or the farming practices can vary, hugely in that space, but they're almost universally disadvantaged in terms of capital, right? Like it's not, so the one thing that they have in common, while the practices are different and also our perception of what that is different, that they still have the same problem. So let's talk about, can we meet some of these farmers? Like, can you characterise maybe some of the particular developing market example for us, and then some of the work you're doing outside Australia as well?
Yeah, for sure. So you're right, there are so many different farmers. There are 570 million farmers. A third of adults globally work in the agricultural end of supply chains.
Yep.
So this is...
So we're structurally disadvantaging 1/3 of our adult population.
Yeah.
Right.
I
Good to
guess so. Yeah, it's probably not worth laughing over, but one of the things that I think is a very real concern for there's millions of cooperatives globally who have a mandate to improve the lives of their farmers. There are government bodies who have a mandate to improve the lives of their farmers. There are traders and people who are aggregating and selling on to like big food and beverage companies who have the same mandate. So there are a lot of people who are heavily invested in improving the livelihoods of these farmers. And then there's also the farmers themselves. So I think that there's a large community of people who really care about this space. And there's the conscious consumer, however financially motivated or not they might be. But I think that what we have to do is start to like leverage the real value of the technology for each of these participants. And that's been one of the real challenges, because I'll introduce you to a customer now.
Yeah, do it.
So the Australian Tea Tree Industry Association is headed up by a man named Tony. And he's an awesome guy, but he is responsible for managing all 200 Australian tea tree farmers. He spends his whole time out on their properties, certifying their produce, because Australia has a really strict code of practice accreditation. So it's certified 100% pure Australian tea tree oil, code of practice accredited. And they align with all of the international standards. Australian tea tree oil is the best in the world. But Tony is doing this entire process of going out to farms annually, certifying them, coming back into his office and trying to manage not only the climate impact, the export supply chain impact on the businesses for all these farmers, but also trying to secure the certification process. And he sees trades going constantly through international markets for more than was produced annually in the Australian tea tree crop. So this year, I was chatting to him yesterday, and I think they've had a record season. But say they produce around 1,000 tonnes per year, he'll see trades moving through international markets for 5,000 tonnes of Australian code of practice accredited tea tree oil. But there's no tools for him to actually go to that trade and say, I'm the industry certifier, and I am saying that that trade is false and that this is an adulterated product, and kind of put his mark on it. So he's not protecting his farmers. He's not giving them a way of actually preserving the value of their product, because he doesn't have the tools available. He desperately wants to. So we're working with Tony to put a system in place where he not only digitises his current operations, which is really important for him, spending so much time doing paper-based stuff, but actually then give him a tool to go into those markets and attached to those trades, put his claim as to whether or not that asset is accredited or not. And that changes the entire way that we're recognising value in that industry globally. Because then if you're an Australian farmer and you have that certificate attached to your record of your asset, then you can go to a financier with much more confidence.
And price certainty.
And price certainty, exactly. And say, okay, well, this is the value of my asset. So that's what we're doing with Tony.
Awesome.
But I guess maybe another one worth mentioning at this point is going back to the Papua New Guinea example, because I think that's a really interesting, different type of farmer. So, I wish I could show you some photos right now, René, because it was pretty funny. Like we were working with an awesome group, another Australian tech company who were helping build out the application, like a really simple mobile tool for the farmers in PNG. And then we were working with the government in Papua New Guinea and the UN. And we all went over there, we're on farm, and this just shows you like the level of digitization in ag. We had these RFID tags, super simple tags, to tag the pigs so that they could then start recording a digital record of the pig using this tag. And our developers who were over there to conduct like a handover of the technology and a regional developer training program were the ones chasing the pigs around on farm, trying to tag them with RFID tags.
So just so I get this picture right, so we're talking about a bunch of crypto nerds running around a pig pen, trying to tag pigs.
Catching and tagging pigs.
And what size pig are we talking?
Well, these are really big pigs.
Awesome.
So they're worth like $600 US each.
Yep.
So for a smallhold farmer who might have 3 of these pigs, then
that represents a huge portion of their or all of their annual income.
Yeah, I mean it's a massive problem in Papua New Guinea that people die over pigs.
Yep.
It's the main store of asset. It's the main store of value is in these pigs. So making sure that they can be preserved, because when they go to market, some are pumped up with hormones and they look exactly the same at market as the one that you've fed sweet potatoes and bathed twice a day for the course of its life. There's no way to differentiate it. And the bank has no way to differentiate that. The bank has no way to see that information. So say if you're Ruth, the pig farmer in Papua New Guinea, and you've got 3 pigs, you want $100 to buy some sweet potato, fix the fencing, you can't even call anyone.
No.
So the opportunity there most of the time is to go to like microfinance, where we're talking like maybe 20 to 25% interest rates.
Yes.
That market needs to be more competitive, and it can be more competitive once we get better data flowing from on farm. So Ruth can use a really simple tool, scan the pig's ear once the developers have
caught the pig,
chucked it in, and then she can create this like verified record of each of her pigs, share those records through the Geora platform with the financier. The financier then sends the money to Ruth. She can make her repayments, completely changing like intergenerational poverty in these situations, because you're able to inject capital where none has been available.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. So, and I guess one of the big problems then obviously is asset dilution, because if you've got quality variability, then from a finance perspective, your risk is that you don't know whether it's the hormone pig or the sweet potato pig. So fundamentally, what you've got is this blended rate that you have to provide finance at, rather than actually specifically valuing the underlying asset.
Yeah.
So we're talking about removing that complexity.
We are, slowly. So it's then, obviously as you get better, more trusted data coming in off farms, you're able to tailor your financial products better and not have to kind of balance out that potential risk of fraud or whatever else is happening on farm side. But yeah, I think we're getting much closer.
Awesome. So, I mean, whilst I'm more than happy to laugh at crypto bros on farms, for a considerable period of time, let me know, just as we come towards the end of the session, what's your biggest lesson from 2020? Like, how has that shaped who Geora is, changed your priorities? Like, what has that meant? I mean, I know for a lot of founders, it's been a pretty tricky period of time. So.
Yeah. One lesson from 2020, is that what we're doing?
Yep.
I think that we came into 2020 off the back of the drought and bushfires going, okay, well, we really need to diversify geographically. And so we started doing that. We now have customers here in Singapore. We have much more of an Asian focus, but then 2020 hit for real. And I was like, right, I can no longer travel anywhere to speak with our customers. And that's really important in ag historically.
Yep.
So we actually put everything online in a platform, opened it up just to see what happened. And with no marketing, we had 70 developers start playing around with our tools within 2 months.
Wow.
So that was really cool. That was the biggest lesson, was why were we waiting? Why had we not done that sooner? Why are we not focusing on servicing what is clearly a market of people wanting to leverage technical tools to build out ag applications?
Yep.
And I don't think we would have known that market was so available, if we hadn't been forced to do this with 2020.
So I just want to pause there on that lesson, because open banking has been another big topic of the conference, and there's a very much openness or open services is not a foundational DNA architecture in traditional finance, right? And but what you're talking about here is a massive benefit that has been driven by just opening up the architecture.
Totally. And for our business, right? There's no way I could have got 70 customers in 2020 with our old sales models. And so we've transitioned to something, to use one of the fads that we'll be talking about later this week, to a pure SaaS model, where we've just we've kind of found that there's a freemium model for our company that works really well, because there are so many people who've been engaged by organisations to build out a solution for a specific supply chain that we would have never heard about. We would never have heard about, you know, kind of securing Indigenous supply chains in Canada. And now that's running on Geora. So it's really cool.
Awesome. So look, thank you so much, Bridie, for spending time with us this morning. I've got like a list of questions that I'd still like to ask you, including my favourite one, which is Die Hard Christmas movie.
Love Actually.
Oh, right, there we go. Come on, no way.
No, I know that's bad, isn't it?
No, that's a perfectly acceptable.
No, I tell you what it is, the one for me. It's Gavin and Stacey Christmas special.
I love it.
Oh.
Perfect. Well, to our audience, thank you so much for listening. We're just wrapping up here in the Boat Key networking area, hosted in the Working Capital in Rapyd's office. It's been such a huge pleasure to have Bridie with us and to dive into the pig pen with all of the pigs and the crypto developers. Right now, coming up on the main stage is one of our massive events for the conference. Bill Gates will be addressing everyone. Please feel free to continue to drop questions in, and we can share those later. But really take time, focus on Bill Gates, and then join us back here a bit later in the morning for our next AMA session. Thank you all very much for tuning in.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bridie.